A while ago, I was having a discussion with one of my passengers about a particular passage in the Bible that was being raised by a priest at the church she went to visit in Melrose. He said that the analogy of the camel through the eye of a needle was a mistranslation. I've covered this in a video of my own, which unfortunately doesn't actually come to the same conclusion, because whilst the term camelos can easily be mistranslated as camelos, which can mean a rope rather than a camel, not only does it fit the same analogy or the same thought experiment as the camel through the eye of the needle, so it doesn't really change the message of my thought experiment, it also fails to account for the fact that there are many other references to animals of abnormal size passing through small spaces like the eye of a needle. So it's more than likely Jesus meant it literally and focused on the camel. Those sort of challenges to a person's faith may seem disrespectful, but realistically, that's what science is about. Challenging people's expectations of the world. And that's also what experimental theology is about. Challenging one's expectations of the Bible. Making sure that it's grounded, that your beliefs are rational. Many people might say that rational and the Bible don't coincide, but you'll be amazed how much they do. That's why I tend to focus on things that challenge my faith, especially in the last 3 videos I've done. I did them back to back because I thought it's better to have all of those addressed at once. And see where it goes from there. And genuinely at those points I was wondering whether my faith would last. Many people might think I was doing all that for clickbait, but in reality I don't bother with clickbait. If it's genuinely something I think will affect my faith, I will be honest. I don't go in for false advertisement. What you see is what you get. So what are these videos? The first one was by Holy Kool-Aid, who was questioning the supposed base belief that Jesus needed to die on the cross for our sins. That was an interesting one because it tackled something I didn't really consider the base teaching of Christianity. Jesus being God, coming to earth, living for us and dying for us on the cross, and of course being resurrected. That is the base teaching of Christianity. Not that he necessarily had to die. If anything, that was more a consequence of him coming to earth. Him having to teach us. Of all the reasons that he came to earth in the first place, really. His attempt to poke a hole in it by mentioning the what was it? Oh yes, a young man who was paralysed, being healed, and his sins removed, was not only a failing of him to understand the basics of Christian law and some of the basic aspects that I learned in GCSE philosophy. It's also him trying to project that onto his audience. Will I call it disingenuous? No, I'll just call it projecting, which I'm pretty sure it is. The second video, that was an interesting one, and required me to delve into all manner of historical records. This was on whether Jesus would have been taken down from the cross and buried, or whether he would have been left there as a sign to all those who would rebel against Rome. This was interesting because it required us to look at the characters surrounding the crucifixion story and consider, would they have been as portrayed in the Bible? And would that mean it would have been done differently? The simple answer is not really. Even given the benefit of the doubt. Pilate was prone to being bribed. People knew this. Philo of Alexandria knew that, and that's one reason why he hated Pilate. And this resulted in him being just as to not only take a bribe and put Jesus on the cross in the first place, but also to take another bribe and have Jesus taken down from the cross, or at least allow the Sanhedrin to take him down. If you bear in mind that Jesus wasn't a Roman prisoner, and as far as I'm aware, only said one thing that could ever be construed as rebellious against Rome. That being that he brings a sword, not peace. And that ultimately his accusers were all the Jewish leaders. Who probably wanted someone to overthrow Rome, but Jesus just wasn't interested in it. And you can see that realistically, the Romans would have little need to crucify Jesus. But at the insistence of the Sanhedrin, and maybe even mentioning that Jesus had said something about bringing a sword and declaring himself king of the Jews, add that to a bit of money being passed over, Pilate would have had him crucified. But then the Jews would have removed him from the cross because he was causing a stir, and thus people were wondering whether they would in fact be the right people. So the fact is, he was more a symbol against the Jews that crucified him than against the Romans who put him up there. Even though I had a bit of a fearsome debate with someone, which would be in the tails of that video, it's worthwhile considering that those things don't always lead to productive endings. The third video, which is answering Jeff's debates on Jesus being fake and Christianity being based on not only Platonic law but also a lie spun by the Romans, is basically a conspiracy theory. Whilst taking it seriously, as I always do with these things, because you never know, they could very well have things rightly said, and I need to consider them. It is clear that it seems to be a conspiracy theory. One that's been around for a very long time. And like all conspiracy theories, it hits two major flaws. One, there's generally some information that people tend to forget about. That being that the earliest possible time that conspiracy could have begun was around the time of the Jewish revolt in, what was it, 66 AD. Whereas Christians have been known to be in the capital of Rome, of the Roman Empire, by at least 64 AD, if not 41 AD. Also considering that if it was a conspiracy, we would have far more records. We do have far more records of Jesus than we already do. That would have survived the destructions and the persecutions, which is another thing they keep forgetting. And also, sooner or later, someone would have said, hang on, he didn't actually exist. I was in Judea at the time, I knew about Judea, nothing was like that at all. Some might say Philo of Alexandria is like that because he didn't mention Jesus. But then again, his Old Testament beliefs were based on Platonic philosophy, which taught more about the Logos of God, which is more of a spiritual being rather than a physical person. True, he was a Hellenic Jew, but you bear in mind the Hellenistic Jews would have been spread across the Eastern Empire due to Alexander the Great. Due to Alexander the Great conquering much of that region of the world and the Eastern Mediterranean, Hellenistic influences would be expected, and most certainly would have been in Judea long before it reached Alexandria. Also remember that other people were being called the Son of God or even the King of the Jews at the time. Whilst Jesus was a very quiet person and again didn't have much written about him, Philo wouldn't have any reason to listen to anything small coming from Judea about Jesus, though he does mention Pilate had a predilection to executing people without trial. And of course taking bribes. If anything, these videos, these studies I do, they challenge my faith in a constructive manner. It is literally like forging. My faith is being plunged through the fires, heated and stretched, and then hammered with great precision, guided and shaped. Try to bungle the task occasionally. But patience, double checking, and occasionally going back in for more heat. And I can get a sword, an iron-hard faith, that is stronger and more rational than most people ever seem to expect. It is a challenge, and a difficult one at times. It takes many days of research, many days of essay writing, and often have to start over again. But, as I often tell people, if you want to be a mountain biker, you have to climb the mountain first. Same with anything. In order to coast down, as we all want to do, we have to work hard to get up there in the first place. That's just basic common sense. To reap the reward, you have to put in the work. In some cases, just get more work. I don't like making judgments about atheists and how they lost their faith, if they ever did in the first place, if they even had any. But it's these situations that often make me wonder, where did they go to church, who taught them, and what were they taught about in regards to asking questions? That's why I constantly push experimental theology. Because it forces us to rethink and even look for things that could potentially be the thing that breaks us down. As I said in my last video, Christopher Hitchens said that no theist will admit what will destroy their faith. And yet I mentioned at least 3 that could potentially bring down my faith. Like I said, that's not clickbait. That is me being honest. So I think it is time that I actually looked at all the things that could potentially destroy my faith and put it on display. The way to improve is to challenge oneself. And with each progressive argument won, each progressive bit of information gathered, you can either use it to improve your skills or strengthen your armour. However, I mention armour because anyone that uses armour, anyone that seriously understands armour, sooner or later, someone's going to punch through it. And unless they admit that, they are more likely to get struck by it. Plate armour is incredibly vulnerable to percussion weapons or even piercing weapons like spiked axes, maces, Baxter Korban, war mallets, God and Dag, you name it. That doesn't make them useless. But it does mean that you need to know what someone's wielding and how they will use it. If you just rely on your armour, sooner or later you will fail. So by all means, build up the armour, but never ever slacken in your training. So at some point in the next few months, I'll do my research and figure out what will completely destroy my faith, and then make a video. May seem foolish, but I want to put Christopher Hitchens on good notice. If he wants to attack religion, he has to attack everyone in that religion, not just the ones that are the weak. Because sooner or later someone's going to come along. Sooner or later someone's going to come along and stand up to him. Sooner or later someone will face him that he might not be able to defeat. So stay tuned for that video. It will be out in the new year, I think. And until then, consider what will make you lose your faith, in the same way that atheists should consider what will practically make them believe. Stay safe, and God be with you, my friends.